Good afternoon, fellow Jamaicans and friends of Jamaica. Thank you for joining us for this very special virtual information session with the Registrar General's Department. I will now hand over to High Commissioner, His Excellency Alexander Williams, to give you the formal welcome.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Siva. Good afternoon and evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here to welcome you all to this virtual session put on by the Registrar General's Department. And we have no other than the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Charlton McFarlane, who will be fielding all your various questions that you have in relation to what they do for Jamaicans both at home and abroad. I can tell you that the Registrar General's Department has undergone changes both in terms of the legislation, the forms and certificates that they have. And I know that to some extent this might have caused some disquiet within the diaspora community. And I'm sure he will address the cause for the changes in some of those certificates and forms that have happened over the years, and the way in which the whole system of registration has tightened up over the past few years. It would be wrong of me not to emphasize a particular opportunity that you will have to engage the Registrar General's Department and other government agencies in June of this year. I speak of none other than our Global Jamaica Diaspora Conference, which will take place in Montego Bay, June 16 to June 19. You will be able to stay in wonderful hotels like the Ibera Star and Ocean Coral Springs and be able to, in real time, engage the Registrar General Department to get out your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, what have you, do your ancestry search, and so on, to facilitate you in accessing all of the services that they provide. I implore you to go to a particular website, which is diasporaconferenceja.eventbrite.com. Let me repeat, diasporaconferenceja.eventbrite.com. Register and attend the Diaspora Conference in Montego Bay, St. James. It is going to be a wonderful opportunity. And let me say again, thank you, Mr. Charlton McFarlane, for putting on this virtual session. There are a lot of questions that I'm sure that you're going to have to field, and I'm sure you have a lot of excellent information to impart. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Excellency Alexander Williams and the rest of the team from the British High Commission. It's good to be here. I take a great pleasure, each time I'm asked to present on the Registrar General's Department in terms of what we are doing. It fills me with a sense of joy. Right, and can I tell you that just yesterday we printed our first birth certificate in Braille format, right? So the members of the visually impaired community, for the first time would be able to read on their own the information that is contained in the birth certificate, right? So we are talking about empowerment. We are talking about inclusivity, and that is what the RGD is about. But there's something else that the RGD is about, and that is efficiency. We have come a long way in trying to be as efficient as possible with the services that we offer. And since 2020 in particular, we would have taken on a mantra called digitally bold. And as such, I will, present for about 15 to 20 minutes on the services that we offer and the various modalities through which our customers, our Jamaicans, can access those services. So I am going to now share my screen. Did this yesterday, so, and I pride myself on being able to do it independently now without the assistance of my friend Theo. So I am yes, it should be loaded now. Should be loaded now. Are you seeing my screen? Are you seeing my presentation, Jose?
Not just yet.
Yeah.
Not just yet.
Oh. Let me try again. It says uploading now, so it should be coming up soon.
Wonderful.
Yes, and while it comes up, joining me today is Mr. Rayton Burrell, who is one of our programmers. So he's really an IT expert. However, Rayton started his career at the RGD as a customer service rep. And Rayton is here today because after my presentation, he will actually spend some time to walk us through two online application platforms. And we decided to do that because I know that, especially for persons who I'm presenting to, that is really the modality that you will access. So you will go on the website and you will try to navigate to our website to apply for your certificates, to apply to make an adjustment to your certificate. So I know that that presentation will probably be the highlight of the session this evening. Okay, so we are happy that Rayton is here. So let me not suffer you any longer. Let me just get right into it. So the RGD is a government agency. The RGD has a rich, long history. The RGD was first established in 1879, right? That's just under 150 years ago. And it has responsibility for the registration of what we call vital events. And vital events refer to our births, our deaths, our adoptions, our stillbirths, and also our marriages, but only those that occur in Jamaica or within Jamaican waters. The RGD, as a result of this and of having this large repository, we support demographic planning by the government through the provision of timely statistics and analysis. And also we categorize according to international standards. So the RGD is responsible for the safekeeping as well of all public records, including acts. So there are two aspects of the RGD. One area that deals with vital events or births or deaths or marriages. And then there's the other section of the RGD that deals with the safekeeping of public records and deeds and so on. That is what we call the Island Records Office. So persons who need to register a power of attorney, persons who may want to record their will, right? All of those services. If you want to do a name change, what we refer to as a deed poll, those services are also provided at the RGD. The vision of the leadership team at the RGD is digitally bold. And we have a strategy. It's a one-word strategy. And our strategy is delivery. In a real way, we view our services as services that we offer that actually facilitates something else, right? So when someone comes to us for a birth certificate, most times it is to facilitate getting a passport, to facilitate getting their pension sorted out, to facilitate getting employment, right? So it is really an underlying pillar that is used to support almost everything else that an individual will require as they go through their life. locally, we have a presence in every single parish. Okay, we have full offices in 9 parishes across the country. However, we have smaller registration centers in those smaller parishes. So all the major town centers in Jamaica would have an RGD office. However, we do recognize that, probably the size of the diaspora is just as large as, the number of Jamaicans living here, right? And while this data might be a bit old per se, but we know that significant number of Jamaicans live in Europe, and most of the Jamaicans that live in Europe actually reside in the United Kingdom. So, having been cognizant of this, the RGD had to, in a real way, ensure that we make our services accessible as far as possible to our Jamaicans who reside overseas, right? So that when they need to do business with the RGD, they don't need to necessarily fly down each time, because that would just drive up the cost of transactions, right? And as such, we would have tried to improve our online services platform. In terms of the services that we offer what is called registration of births, deaths, marriages, and adoptions. Now, I want to be very clear on something here. Many persons believe that when their life event is registered and they get that, what we call a certificate of registration from the RGD, many of us believe that that is equivalent to a certificate, right? I'm here to tell you now that that is not the case. Okay, the registration of an event and the receipt that you get after that registration, that is not a certificate. And I saw this a lot in October 2022 when we were in the UK, right, where a lot of Jamaicans, they came to us and what they presented to us saying that here's my birth certificate. However, when they go to other government entities such as passport office or tax office or national land agency, or even when they go to the private sector entities wishing to do business, when they present that piece of paper to them, they are told this is not the birth certificate. And the truth is it is not the birth certificate, right? So the registration is a different service from actually the creation of a birth certificate or a marriage certificate or even a death certificate. The fact of the matter is, while the RGD is required in law to register these events, it is incumbent on the individual to then come in and make an application for their certificate, right? And that now, when they make that application, we then print a fully secured certificate with, a security paper that has over a dozen security features embedded in it to ensure the integrity of the document. So that's the first misunderstanding that I want to clear up. The registration receipt that you get upon registering the event is very different from the actual vital certificate. Okay? In addition to that, the RGD also produces burial orders, right? And these burial orders, we only produce these burial orders, though, for deaths that occur in the hospitals or deaths that are that the police have indicated that they have no interest in. So, for example, if someone was driving and they had an accident and maybe the accident was fatal, if that person comes to the RGD office to register the death and to receive a burial order, we can only produce that burial order if the police in writing declares that this death is not under investigation, because that death would be deemed as either a sudden death or a violent death. Okay, so many persons will actually say that they have a death, but they can't get the death certificate. If the death was sudden or violent, if the police and then afterwards the coroner's court don't complete and conclude the investigation, the RGD does not have the authority to issue a death certificate thereafter. In addition, the RGD also offers what we call a no impediment certificate, right? And this certificate is to certify that an individual is not married, right, in Jamaica. So in essence, what it is to say that before you get married, you now have the option to do a search of the RGD database to obtain whether or not the individual that you intend to marry has a marriage in Jamaica. All right. Now, if the person was married in Barbados or in Guyana or Trinidad or the US, we can't offer that information because we just would not know. Right. But what this service does, it helps to safeguard against the possibility of bigamy, which, as you know, is against our laws. We also offer our Outer Many search. Now, this was rebranded about 2 years ago. It was originally what we call the genealogy search, and this is very popular among members of the diaspora, where it allows persons to trace their family roots and their family history. Can I tell you, I did a search for my birthday, which was 2 weeks ago, right? And the RGD, our records were able to go back 7 generations, right? In fact, it went back so far that they were able to identify the slave that came over, right, from West Africa, who was really then for us the real patriarch 7 generations removed, right? So we do have a rich repository of data, and we also encourage persons to apply for this service. Another spin-off, or what I would say add-on to this service, is what we call the familial cause of death tree. Now, it may sound a bit morbid, but what this does, because the RGD has to record deaths, and once we record a death, we have to record the cause of death. What we can do also is to map the various causes of death, which means we can say that this person, is perhaps pre-exposed to hypertension, to heart conditions, to, cardiovascular conditions, and so on. And what it does is it arms the living relatives with information relating to what type of illness they may be susceptible to. And as such, they have the time to amend or modify their lifestyle. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you something very interesting. Our board member visited the agency 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And when we showed them this product, the board member said to me, he said, CEO, I'm now 58 years old. My mother died of a heart condition when she was 60. And can I tell you, I have been terrified because I'm approaching 60, right? And so this was a real psychological issue for him, And I said, fair enough. But did you know that we have a product that could actually tell you that even if you did not know, and so you could have made adjustments and modify your lifestyle before? He did not know. So for him, that information was so absolutely useful because, it resonated with him on a personal level. So this is just an ad for our genealogical research, right? And you can apply for this online. Some of the other services we offer, we do document recording. So we are responsible for the recording of deeds such as deed polls and conveyances and powers of attorney. And why is this important? It is important because it is when the RGD records these documents that these documents become legal documents, right? It is the recording of these documents that give legal life to these documents. So, for example, a deed poll can be drafted by pretty much anyone who, has a knowledge of how deeds are drafted. However, the only place you can go in Jamaica to have that deed poll legal, which means your name would now have been legally changed, is the RGD, because the RGD has to record it, right, and stamp it, and thus gives it that legal life. The RGD also facilitates what we call record updating, right? This is amendments to our records through what we call a record updating service. Now, the truth is this. When a record is created, for whatever reason, that record may require some change to it down the road. All right. Whether it is that a name was spelled incorrectly, whether it is that in some cases someone wants to adjust the name of their child, someone may want to switch around the first name and the second name, right? So for whatever reason, someone may have registered a child and they don't have the father's information on it. And so, and when the father comes forward, the father wants to add his information on it. So there are several reasons why someone may want to update or amend the information on a record. Now, obviously, we can't just amend it just like that. There's a process prescribed in law that requires the completion of certain documents along with the submission of certain supporting documents. However, the point is that we do offer record updating services. And I must say, from what the evidence I've seen, especially coming out of the UK, a lot of our services, a lot of the demand coming out of the UK is actually for record updating services. And I'm happy to say that we have, since 2022, placed those services online in a real way, so our customers have greater access to it. And Rayton will give you that demo shortly after I am finished. So these are the various amendments to the records that we offer. We offer, as I said, the addition of the father's particulars. We also offer a re-registration. We offer a correction of error. We also offer a late entry of name, because what I've realized, and this was even the case with my own father, who was born in the 1940s. In the past, it appears that there was a practice to register births with either one name or no name. And this was actually supported in the legislation, where a birth can be registered and considered to be legal without a name being there. However, as time passed, right, and as the requirements for identity management, became more stringent, we now do not print birth certificates without a name or with only a Christian name. Okay, so every birth certificate that we print now has to have the first and the last name, and if there is a middle name, that has to be there as well. So we have seen a lot of demand for this service as well, which is called a late entry of name. And finally, we do have what we call a late registration, because sadly, we still do have pockets of Jamaicans whose birth was never registered, right? And that is something that we are strategically and deliberately trying to address, because again, as we said, the birth certificate really opens the door for so many things. So someone without a birth certificate is literally locked out from economic and social services, and that is not something that we want ideally. We do also offer what is called a registry wedding service. So we have 10 offices, 10 full offices island-wide, and persons can fly down and get married at any one of our 10 offices island-wide. We actually just spent about $10 million up landscaping the garden area at the head office. So persons who actually want the option, they can come down and actually get married in our outdoor garden at the RGD. Okay. Just to say as well that we have also added a little online feature here. Now, don't get me wrong. We do not facilitate online weddings. What we facilitate is the booking of the appointment online. Okay. So in essence, you can stay in the UK, you can log on to our website, you can search for a convenient date for your wedding, you can obtain the documents from the relevant ministries and stuff like that. You can then upload those documents, pay the fee, and literally all you would need to do is just fly down to say I do. Okay. So this is something that is also very popular amongst persons living overseas, because if I'm not mistaken, about 50% of our weddings are actually done by persons who are not living in Jamaica. Well, at least one party is not living in Jamaica, right? So we are very proud of the fact that persons can book their appointments online. And this is just another flyer for the registry wedding. So can I tell you, one of the major achievements of the RGD is that in 2020, just before COVID, only about 5 services were available online. In 2024, as I speak to you now, we have over 15 services available online, right? So we have increased by more than 200% the number of online services. And what that means is that we would have made access and accessibility easier for everyone, whether you're residing in Jamaica or overseas. So how do you access the RGD services? You can visit our website, www.rgd.gov.jm. You can send us an email, information@rgd.gov.jm. We have telephone lines. Now, I must tell you that we are working to improve our telephone. In fact, we have sent out a tender now to purchase a call management system, because I know that we were having significant challenges with persons getting us via telephone. And that is why we actually went ahead to introduce additional modalities where persons could contact us. What are those additional modalities? We have dedicated WhatsApp lines, right? The numbers are on the screen, right? We also introduced about a year and a half ago a live web chat. So when persons go on our website, a chat icon comes up and persons can actually send messages in real time and receive messages Mondays to Fridays from 8:30 to 4 p.m. Right? I think the response time is less than 2 minutes at the average response time. So we encourage persons to use these various avenues to reach and access the RGD. In addition to these avenues, we have also introduced a new feature where once an application has been made and you want to track the status of that application, where it is in the processing of it, you can log on to our website. You can go to the relevant sections of our website and you can enter the reference number, because every application has a reference number. It's a 12-digit number, along with, I believe, it's an email address, and you will be able to see in real time where in the process your certificate application is, right? And stuff. And you can also make comments or make queries on it in that same screen. And also, you can reach us via our social media pages. We are active on Instagram, and we are active on X, and we are very active as well on Facebook, right? And we do have persons that man those pages every day and respond to whatever queries that they may have. So, I mean, this was a whirlwind presentation, but the point of it was just to guide you and to point you to our services and the fact that you can access our services online. I want to thank you all for your attention, and I will now, if it's okay with our host, turn over to Mr. Rayton Burrell, who will actually walk us through how to do a couple of these applications online. So I thank you again for inviting us, and I hope the presentation was reasonable in terms of the information that was provided.
Hi, good afternoon again, everybody. I'm Rayton Burrell, the database administrator at RGD, and for my presentation, I'll be walking through, as Mr. McFarlane had said, we have quite a number of our products and services now online. So we'll be doing a short demonstration of how you can go about completing these applications. Just let me bring up the screen. Right, is everybody able to see my screen now?
Well, I'm seeing it from here. I hope the other members of the team are seeing it.
Okay, all right, great. All right, so the easiest way for us to, for our customers to get to our website is by typing in the name of our agency, either via Google or Bing, or you can visit our website at www.rgd.gov.jm. Right, so we're just going to search for RGD Jamaica here. And the first result that should come up is the official website of the RGD. So once you go ahead and click on it, you will be greeted with the home page. Now, how you get to our applications form is by clicking there's a button at the top right corner of the screen that says apply now. When you click on this button, you'll be taken to our application portal. Now, this portal contains the links to all the applications that we offer, or all the products and services that we offer online. And all you have to do is just scroll through and pick the service or product that you're interested in. So we'll be doing a short demo for the process of applying for a birth certificate online. This application, or making this application, assumes that you have some information already in your possession. And if you're not sure, there's a requirements button, which will show you all the things that you need before you'll be able to successfully complete the application, right? These include the full and correct name of the child, the date of birth of the child, the birth entry number that you would get from the certificate of registration, gender of the child, the place of birth, parish of birth, and the parent's name. So once you have all this information, all you have to do is go ahead and click on apply now. And you see some additional information. This is usually related to new registrations. So if the registration just took place within the past few days, we normally ask that you allow for approximately 10 days for that record to get to our head office to avoid any delays in the processing. So first field that you're greeted with, and an important thing to point out, is that all the mandatory fields are highlighted in red. So before you can go ahead and submit this application, all the fields highlighted, or all the text boxes highlighted with the red color, will need to be completed. So you have the option of applying for, well, there is no limitation on the number of copies that you can apply for. So you'd enter the child's first name, the date of birth of the child, gender or sex here as it's stated on the form, the place of birth, you'll also be required to enter the parish of birth, and Victoria Jubilee is in Kingston. The district of birth as well. All this information will be, if you've gotten previous copies before, it will be on those previous copies or on the certificate of registration. And the birth entry number. Now, again, this is an alphanumeric combination that is usually stated on the certificate of registration. All right, then we move on to the parents' information. So the mother's information is a mandatory field because we are not able to locate a record without the mother's the mother's name is one of the fields that we use to locate our records from our repository. And then we'd go ahead and apply or enter the applicant's address. Now, the applicant doesn't necessarily have to be the child or parent or anybody related to the child or parent. It can be a friend, a family member. Well, yeah, a family member. There are no limitations as to who can go ahead and submit an application for a copy of a birth certificate. Email address field is an important field because this is what one of the channels through which we'll communicate to the applicant in the event that we need any additional information. Right. So for overseas customers, the delivery address location or field is disabled because the certificate, once it's complete, will be mailed back to the applicant, right? And then finally, you'd submit the reason for applying. And you have various options here, ranging from driver's license to visa. And if the option or the reason isn't specified, you can place other. And then after you submit your application. Now, the second screen is where you will review the information that you've entered. And once everything is correct, you have two options in terms of the turnaround time. So firstly, there's a 7 to 10 days service period, and then there's the 4 to 6 weeks, and the price for either varies. Right. In terms of payment options, you have the option of either sending an international money order or making the payment online. And I know most persons would opt to pay online with their debit or credit cards. So once you've selected the service, you can then go ahead and select the payment method and submit your application. Right. So at this point, the application has been saved and is in our system. So all you'd have to do is click the button that says click here to pay online, and this will take you to our payment gateway where you'll enter your credit card details. Once the credit card details are entered and the application is submitted, we send a request to our payment gateway provider. Then once they verify payment, payment is updated on the application, sorry. And then the processing begins usually the same or the next business day. So that is in a nutshell, the process for applying for a birth certificate online. Now we're also going to show another one of our products, which is the late entry of name, which Mr. McFarlane had spoken about earlier as well, where customers, so back from the home page, it's the same procedure where you visit our website, you click on the Apply Now button up top, and you would scroll through to find the record updating products. So from the record updating products, you'd have three options. You'd have addition of father's particulars, late entry of name, and correction of error. Now, before you are able to submit a record updating application, you would be required to first download and complete some forms, including a statutory declaration. So the forms are available on our website, and we can share a link to that page after the presentation. So once you've downloaded the forms, completed them, and get them certified in the presence of a notary public, you can now come back to our website and submit your application. So you click on the record updating option, select a late entry of name, and then apply now. Now the form is very similar to the birth form because it requests the same information. It does, however, have a few additional steps because you are then required, after submitting the application, to upload the documents. So we're just going to fill out this form again, the same information for Marianne, where we'd enter her name, her date of birth, gender, her place of birth, her parents' information, and the address or the information for the applicant, including their name and address. So once all the fields, especially the required fields, have been completed, you'd go ahead now and submit the application. And a good thing about the form is that once you attempt to submit the application, if a field is missing, especially the mandatory fields, it will alert you and indicate which field it is that needs to be completed before you can proceed. So once you've submitted, you'd go ahead again and review the application to ensure that everything that you intended to type is what you actually entered in the text boxes. There is only one service available at this time for our record updating products, and it's the 7 to 10 day service. Also, you're only able to make payment online. So if you are submitting a record updating product online, we currently only support making payments online or in office, but for the purpose of this demonstration, we'll be doing it online. So the first step is what I would have referred to you with, indicated before. There are some forms that you'd first have to download and complete before you are able to successfully or to complete the application. So we'll be moving on to step 2, which is where you upload your documents, right? And there are 3 documents here that are mandatory. It's the completed indemnity form, the completed statutory declaration, and a government issued ID for the declarants. And the declarants are usually the persons who are filling out or declaring on the application. So you go ahead and click Add Attachments, and this will open a new window, which will allow you to select the files. So you click on the Choose Files. And then you'd select the file from your phone or computer. And the form, we support three main document types. So if you're uploading, we'd prefer or would recommend that it be a PDF or an image. Now, for the details section, it's not necessarily mandatory, but in the event that you need to differentiate, for instance, you have two IDs and it's not clearly stated which ID it is, you can enter in this field that it's either declarant's one ID or the father's ID, and so on. And once you're satisfied that the correct file was selected, you'd attach the file. We're also going to go ahead and attach the indemnity form. And the ID card for the declarant. So once all the forms have been uploaded, you can either go ahead and edit in the event that you need to remove, or once you're satisfied, you close the window. And this will take you back to the previous screen where all you have to do is make payment, or the only thing left for you to do is make payment. So you click here or click the button on the section of the web page, and it will take you back to the credit card page where you'd enter your credit card details. And once payment has been verified, the processing of the application will commence. And again, these are just two of the many services that we offer online. But the procedure is usually similar between all the forms that you'd have to interact with, where you'd be required to fill out a form, fill out or upload documents where necessary, and then make payment, and that's it. Once the applications are processed, they're mailed out, and you can pick it up at either your post office or delivered, I think, directly to the customers. And one final thing before I end is, in the event that you encounter issues with processing or filling out the application at any point or at any step during completing the application, there is our web chat option that's available on all the forms. So if you encounter an issue, all you have to do is click on the web chat icon, and you can start a conversation with one of our representatives who are waiting to assist you. That ends my presentation. I'd like to turn over back to the host.
All right. Thank you very much, Rayton. I trust that presentation was useful for everyone, and we now turn back over to our host in London.
Thank you very much. It was very useful, and some of the comments so far is that it was awesome and very informative and so forth. And we do have some questions for the RGD team, and I think one of the questions you sort of answered, but the person is concerned. It says, because they were saying, can anyone apply for my birth certificate, which you answered, but now they're concerned that how do you prevent it from being used for fraudulent purposes?
Okay, thank you very much. So that's an interesting question, and so I'll answer it based on how I understand the law to be, and then I will add a little more to it. The records or in the RGD, they are under law considered to be, public. So it's a public registry, and because it is a public registry, it means then that persons, individuals, can actually conduct searches of our registry. The truth is that in order to apply for someone's certificate, whether birth, death, or marriage, there are some specific information that would be required that under normal circumstances, only the owner or someone so empowered by the owner of the certificate would have. So that is the only safeguard we have at this point in time. The truth is that once someone has all the requisite information, then based on the current Registration of Births and Deaths Act, we could not prevent someone from applying for a birth certificate, right? We have raised though this issue with our parent ministry, because we are in the process now of repealing and replacing the Registration of Births and Deaths Act, and it is one of the matters that is right now undergoing rigorous debate as to whether or not the status of it should continue as a public registry, or if it should have, tighter restrictions as it relates to access and accessibility. So that is the situation as it is right now.
Okay, and there's from Karen Tippett Lahane, and her situation, she seems to be trying to
Death certificate.
certificate. It seems more like it's a bit of, because she has 4 different interaction on the chat with regards to more of the Otamene service, the genealogical research service, because she is having paternal grandfather birth record and also records from the 29th of June
Right, and if I
in
may,
St. Anne, and there's a whole, but I think she really would benefit from the Otamene genealogical service.
She would. I don't know if she has applied for that service per se, because I saw her comment came online, but I wasn't so sure what the specific question was or challenge. But if it is that she is trying to identify, relatives a few generations in the past, then if it is that specific information is not known about that individual, and so what is required is more search, it is recommended that the genealogical product could provide significant assistance where that is concerned.
Okay. And Kerry R was asking if the presentation, she has a query about applying for a death certificate that's over 20 years old, or that was registered 20 years ago.
So the fact is, once we have those records in our repository, then the online platform can be used to facilitate the application for those records. What we also have, and I mean, Rayton did not go through that, but for many persons who actually use our online platform, if it is that they don't have all the information required to make that application, they then start with a search application, which is also online, where they put in whatever basic information they have about the birth certificate or the death certificate or the death certificate or even the marriage certificate. They put in that, and then the RGD does one of 2 things. We either do a real-time search of our database and returns the result within a few seconds, or because not all of our records are yet digitized. So if it is that this record is not digitized, then that search application kicks up into our index search department, where we have staff members that physically go and search for the record. And once we find it, we then send the customer the results of that search. And then the cost of that is, I think, 250 Jamaican dollars. So it's really minimal. But then now our customers can use the results of that search to then now go ahead and complete their application for the birth certificate or the death or the marriage certificate. So we do recognize that maybe at the point when you come to apply, you don't have all the information. In order to get the information that you need, there is a search application that is also online that can be used and will afford you with all the information. And to answer the question directly from Karen or Kerry, I'm not sure what the name was, Karen, is that even if the record is 20 years old, 40 years old, it doesn't matter. Once we have it in our records, you can apply for that certificate and you can apply for it online.
Okay, that was Kerry's question. Going back to Karen, she said that she did apply and didn't hear back. I think she dealt with a Mario from the RGD.
Mario Reynolds. Okay.
Yes, and so she has a birth certificate that she needs to have verified. I'm not too sure what exactly that means, because if it's from you, it should have their usual on the security paper and how it's usually done thing.
So Karen, what I will say then is that because your issue is something very specific pertaining to you, which we probably would not want to discuss in this broad space here, you can always shoot me an email and I will ensure that Mario gets it and Mario responds immediately. So from an email standpoint, it's charlton.mcfarlane, CHARLTON.MCFARLANE, right? So it's charlton.mcfarlane@rgd.gov.jm, right? And my email is checked by myself and also by my admin. So, they will see it and ensure that the requisite individuals get it and they'll action it for you.
And I have one from Renee. She says they're trying to do her Jamaican citizenship and through her grandmother, but her grandmother doesn't have a surname or the father's name on her birth certificate, and the grandmother has died, and they wanted to know how can they do a late entry of name, and how would they go about that?
All right. The grandmother has died, but the grandmother did not have a surname on the record. So that's a tough. So the first part in adding the surname is not difficult. Once you are able to provide anything that the grandma would have had that has her name, her surname on it, so that can be facilitated, right? Even to the point where if we have expired passport, expired driver's license, expired national IDs of the grandmother, right? And so once we find evidence of the surname, we are able to use that to facilitate the late entry of name. So it shouldn't be an issue. What may be a bigger issue though is, I think the question also went on to say that the father's name was not necessarily on the grandmother's certificate, right? That may require a little bit of discussion. You know what I mean? What I would suggest again for that, because that now may require us enacting on a specific piece of legislation, right, that we would need to have some discussions around. In addition to that, though, just to go back in terms of the first issue of the grandmother not having the surname, you said the grandmother has passed away, but we can also use the grandmother's death certificate, because that death certificate, irrespective of the jurisdiction, whether she died in the UK or died in Jamaica, that death certificate should have the surname, right? And so that will also serve as sufficient evidence to add the grandmother's surname to her birth certificate.
Okay. And Anita is asking, what are the available times of the web chat? I suppose she's thinking, bearing in mind the 6 hour now time difference between the UK and Jamaica.
Okay, so yes, we do have the 6 hour time. But the web chat is Mondays to Fridays from 8:30 a.m. Jamaica time to 4 p.m. Right? So it's Mondays to Fridays from 8:30 to 4 p.m. Of course, if it is that you obviously, if you were to log on at 9 a.m. in the UK, that's probably about 3 a.m. Jamaica time or thereabouts. But the messages will pop up once our team members log on, and they will respond. But once you catch us in that window where our staff are literally at the desk, then the response time is about 2 minutes.
And the Deputy High Commissioner, Mrs. Lear Grant, you had 2 questions.
Yes, thank you. CEO, just you made mention of re-registration. Can you elaborate as to what re-registration is?
Re-registration. Okay,
Yeah.
I was hoping you would not have asked that question. It's not my favorite product. All right. And so, but let me tell you what it is. You know, there was a time when we were concerned, or let me say more concerned, about persons being born out of wedlock and stuff like that, right? So a re-registration was a registration that RGD would facilitate if it is that when the child was born, the parents were not married, but then the parents actually went on to get married, right? And then no, they come back and say, listen, we want the registration to be done to reflect, you know, the fact that the parents are indeed married, right? So we do what is called a re-registration. So in a real way, the only thing that would change on that registration is the fact that the parents, you know, the status of the parents would now be that they are married.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification. And
You're
then
welcome.
there's another one. From time to time, we've seen where persons have what we call the pink slip, which basically is the registration slip. And the registration slip, I've noticed in some instances, have information on the father, but when the birth certificate itself is applied for, the birth certificate has nil in the section for the father, which I find quite curious.
That's interesting. That's interesting, because it shouldn't be the case. You know what I mean? The fact though is that the RGD, we are very meticulous with our registration. So when someone comes to us and present the pink slip or any certificate of registration, we take it. However, we cross-reference it against what we have in our repository, right? And if it is that there is some level of inconsistency, right, then what we tend to do, we rely on what is in our repository, right? So that is that I can only think of that being the only reason why the pink slip, you know, or the certificate of registration would have the father's information, while and when the certificate is applied for, there's nothing there. I can only think of the rationale being that there is some amount of inconsistency. And sad to say, you know, I must say this, is that we have come across cases where information is actually added on these documents after the RGD would have completed the registration, right? So I have seen where a certificate of registration was done. And when we go and examine it, we realize that a piece of information was added thereafter. And when we go and check our source document, that was never the case, right? And of course, we are going to be reliant on our source document. The fact of the matter, though, is that we should not be seeing this type of inconsistency, right? And so if there is an issue, we don't have a problem adding the father's name. However, we have to adhere to the legally established processes that has been outlined for us to effect and complete a complete registration.
All right, and not to hog the question and answer session too much, but from time to time we see where there are slight spelling issues with persons' names.
Just to say, that's one of the questions I have that
Okay.
someone had sent to me. I've been getting questions from WhatsApp, so I've been monitoring my WhatsApp.
Right.
That's what-
And then what are the processes? Because sometimes we tell persons that you may have to do a deed poll, but can they, instead of doing a deed poll, do an amendment? So what are the options that are open to individuals to correct these?
Okay. So in fact, what we now do is we when persons come and say they want a deed poll done, unless they are going to change their first name, for example, from Charlton to Anthony, right? We say, wait a minute. Why do you want the deed poll? What is the issue that you are trying to address? And if it is that it is a spelling issue, for example, then we do recommend, or direct them to do the correction of error. Okay? So there are times, and the truth is that there will be times when there are errors of interpretation. You know what I mean? So for example, because the same person that created the record 10, 15, 20 years ago, right, is not necessarily the same person who is pulling that record now to effect to produce the certificate. So there may be errors of interpretation and stuff. Once it is an error like that, we treat it as a correction of error. There are, in some instances, not all, in some instances where the error is deemed to be RGD's error, then we effect those changes at no cost to the customer. However, if the change is not deemed to be an RGD error, and this distinction is made by the fact that when we look on the record, if the record has something that the customer signed to, and then the customer is coming back to tell us that this is not the correct information, we will point out to say, but you actually signed to it, right? To acknowledge that this is what the information is. Nonetheless, the point though is that we have the avenues available through what we call the correction of error, which is also available online, right? In fact, I don't know if that is what Rayton went through, or was it the late entry of name, right?
Late entry of name.
The late entry of name. Fair enough. But the correction of error is also equally accessible online. And so we encourage our customers to take advantage of that route, as opposed to going with a deed poll. Because one of the things that we must understand with a deed poll, the deed poll changes your name now, but the deed poll does not change the information that is on the birth certificate. Okay? So many persons, when they apply for a deed poll and we give it to them, they are expecting to see the amendment reflected on the birth certificate. That is not how it is done. And so when a deed poll is done, the deed poll and the birth certificate both have to walk hand in hand, right? So that is why we really, for matters that an amendment or a correction to the record can solve, that is what we recommend, okay, over the deed poll.
Okay, so it's best for us to recommend correction of error rather than the deed poll. Okay.
a
Yeah.
spelling.
If it's a spelling
If it's a
error.
spelling error, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to quickly say, because I've seen a couple of queries for matters that is not for the Registrar General's Department, but rather our passport and citizenship issues, which are matters for when we do our virtual session with the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency. So matters about online application and citizenship by descent. It's not for Mr. McFarlane and his team, although they would have an input because you're going to need to have the birth certificate of your parents or grandparents who are the Jamaican born parent or grandparent that they can do your citizenship by descent from, but they would not be able to answer these questions for you. So I'm sorry, Tessie, and the other person who had asked about the online application process. Someone was asking about the genealogical research, and they wanted to know how far back your records go, because they were thinking that they would have relatives from the 1700s. They're trying to trace their family tree. Would we have records going that far back?
Okay, so the RGD, we actually have records going all the way back to the mid 1600s, right? So that is how far back our records go. So if you believe you have information down to the 1700s, then theoretically the RGD would be able to facilitate that type of genealogical research. But what we must say though, and this is important, one of the pillars that is needed for the success of the genealogical search is the propensity for persons to register the events. Okay, now we can appreciate that the further back we go, the propensity to register in births and deaths and stuff may have been less and less. All right, because all we have in our possession are the records of persons who actually registered these events. So if it is that, you know, the family, for whatever reason, was not a family that was prone to ensuring that the, birth certificates and what we call baptismal certificates, christening certificates were done, then the RGD would not have the material on which to conduct our research. Okay, but once we have those materials, our database goes all the way back to the mid 1600s. So in theory, we should or we are able to facilitate genealogical researches all the way back to the 1600s.
Would those include records of persons, of slave records? I think that's what the person was asking.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You had another question?
And I see the email from Karen. I don't know if she's still there. I just want to say I see your email, so that your matter will be forwarded to Mario.
Okay. And someone was asking, just wanted to clarify with regards to the online application, but you did that it would be mailed directly to them in the UK if they did an online application for their records?
Yes. So for any applicant outside of Jamaica, the process is that the certificate will be sent directly to the address that you instruct us to send it to. The only thing I say on this matter is that I know for the UK and the US and stuff like that, we rely on independent courier services, right, to do these deliveries. So just yesterday, for example, a customer reached out to me and sent me their reference number, and I found out that their certificate was printed from the 18th of April, the 18th, yes, and it was sent to the independent courier, and we gave them the tracking number. How can I say this? The truth is that we have, after that, little control in terms of, how efficiently the courier provider gets the certificate to you per se, right? Because in a real way, we are that is not our core business, right? And so what we tend to do is to try to follow up with the couriers. However, it is not our operational arm that can say, okay, we can stop a package here, we can get it on board here, we can ensure it gets to the customer by later this afternoon and stuff. All of those arms, once we print the certificate and hand it over to the independent courier, then we are now really reliant on them to ensure that it gets to the intended destination on time. And why I say this, because we do get a number of calls and queries to say that it's been 2 weeks now, it's been 3 weeks now, I don't have the certificate. And then when we check our system, we realize that it was printed within the service time, it was sent to the courier, the tracking number was sent to the customer. However, the customer is really waiting on the certificate. And so for the customer, as far as they are concerned, the service is not yet complete. They hold the RGD responsible. The truth is that the RGD would have passed on that document to the independent courier for the rest of the service to be completed.
Okay. And just to say, High Commissioner has another engagement, so he will be departing us very shortly. Thank you, High Commissioner, for your presence.
Very much, Siva, and I'm very glad participated, and I'm glad to see that Mr. McFarling is feeling the questions like Viv Richards at the wicket.
Thank you very much, sir. And all being well, I'll see you not too long from now.
Indeed. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you, HC. Just going back to the questions, someone has asked if I just wanted the WhatsApp number that you spoke about and showed on screen. They wanted to. Is it on the website, the RGD website, the WhatsApp numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, all the contact information, including our social media handles, they're all on the website.
Okay, so someone who wasn't able to write the number off quickly enough when you showed the slide, they can just visit the website for those numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
Or rewatch the YouTube.
Or rewatch the YouTube.
And if I may,
you can pause it at that point.
Yeah, but if I may quickly, the WhatsApp lines 876-570-1225, 876-570-1205. Right. But of course, you can always get it from our website.
Okay. And I have a query with regards to marriage certificate. And this is actually from the person is not Jamaican, but they got married in Jamaica. And I think they fell into the trap of what is called, I think when I got married, it was called the bride's copy. And now that they're going through a divorce, they needed the marriage certificate. And I actually told them to go onto the website to apply for it, but they seem to have been having some difficulty because they didn't know the name of the marriage officer. Is there a way around that issue?
The only way around that issue when doing it online is to then, so if you recall earlier, I said that if it is that you don't have all the required information to make the application, then we recommend that you stop at the search application first. So our customer who has that problem of not remembering the name of the marriage officer can go to our search application and enter the information that she has, which would include, I'm sure she would remember the groom's name. She would also remember her name and the date of the wedding, right? She can search using that information, and then we will search our repository and return the result to her, which would include the marriage officer's name, and then that would enable her now to go online and make the full application for the marriage certificate.
And I have one from Gary, who was trying WhatsApp message from Gary, who was trying to do his Jamaican citizenship, only to discover that his father, the name that his father has, was a name that was a name that was given to him when he came up as a child to relatives, to his auntie, and they're having a lot of difficulty trying to figure out what the father's true name was, because the auntie has died, the mother had died very early, which is why they came to. So they were trying to find out is there any help they can get from the RGD in trying to trace what was the father's real name that he got at birth, because the name he's using, there's no birth certificate for him based on the information he provided when they tried to get his birth certificate from the RGD.
Yes. So we can definitely assist with that. But that though, what I would suggest for that Gary does is to engage one of our chat forums, whether it's the online chat or the WhatsApp chat, right? And let us have that information, because I would not necessarily recommend that he does a genealogy search, right? Because I mean, he's only looking at his father's information. So I wouldn't recommend that he pays for a genealogy search, right? However, and at the same time, he's not necessarily asking at this point in time for the birth certificate of his dad. What he wants is to know what his dad's correct surname was. So that could be sent via a query, whether through our social media platform or WhatsApp lines and so on. And the staff members here, the customer service reps, they will undertake that study for you. After you then obtain that though, Gary, if it is that there is indeed a difference in names, then you will then need to make that connection to satisfy PICA that even though the name is different, it is still your dad, right? And or your granddad. I'm not sure of what the relation is. But if there's an inconsistency in the name, then the RGD would have to write a letter to PICA to support your application. Once we have verified that the information is indeed correct and the correction is indeed genuine, then we can always write a letter to say that this is the situation, right? And you can use that to support your application with PICA.
Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Perhaps two questions. One coming out of that question that you received from Gary, because I don't know if Gary's the individual, whether it's his father or his grandfather, if he had any other official government documents to identify him.
Okay.
Because the story is that basically he had a name change, unofficial name change.
Unofficial name change.
UK. So the question is, what was his name in Jamaica? And Gary does not have information on what his name was.
No, they're trying to, I think he's trying to reach out to some cousins, and because the generation of the grandfather's generation, they've all passed. So it's like the aunties and some cousins they're trying in Jamaica that they're making contact with. But sometimes people, I think there's a lot of things where people use pet names.
Yes.
And sometimes the relatives don't know the person's real name.
Yeah.
Because they have grown up knowing him as Mas George or whatever name.
In that instance, if Gary has then the mother or the father's name of that person whose identity is in question, would that assist?
I'm sorry. I was responding to some. I'm really sorry. I apologize.
That's fine. What I wanted to find out was whether if Gary has the parent information of that individual whose identity is in question, because when the person came to the UK, they took on a different identity, and Gary is not sure what the identity was in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Failing having some other form of government ID, government issued ID for that person whose identity is in question. If Gary has information on that individual's parents, would that assist the RGD in
It
perhaps
would
giving
assist
the identity?
it would assist the RGD in being able to identify the birth certificate of the individual in question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. My other question, though, has to do with the genealogy search. What minimum or basic information does one need to have before starting a genealogy search?
I think so. It's interesting. I won't say minimum or basic information, but because it's really almost, for want of a better word, iterative in that it's going to be a lot of consultations with the applicants and stuff like that. However, at minimum, I would think that you would want to know on both sides, both sides of your parents, their name, their date of birth, their siblings information. Right? So you would need to know your parents' information and also your aunts and your uncles' information. Right? You don't need to have all of it, but at minimum, you would need to know that to give us something to work with. Right? So, for example, when they were doing it for me, when I gave them my parents' information and my aunts and uncles, they then called my mother, right? And then they then got from my mother numbers for her sister, who was able to speak about their parents, which would have been my grandparents and stuff like that, right? So it is that kind of process. So at the very minimum, you would need to be able to identify your parents, where they were born, date of birth and stuff, and also their siblings as well. So we can begin to do the type of search that is needed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And just wanted to say, one of the things that we find at the High Commission in terms of some of the calls and queries we get is there are quite a number of people who are in similar circumstances as Gary before, because they came up and they might have come up on this diplomatically, on documents that were of relatives and other persons. So they have gone to school, and it's usually with children, and they have gone to school in a name. They've gone to university, they have their qualifications and everything about them. All their identification here is in that name. But then they want a Jamaican passport and they can't produce a birth certificate in the name that they have been using or what would match with their age and everything. And that is something that we see fairly from time to time, fairly often. And what would be your general, what would you say to the UK diaspora in terms of having their documents in order for when they need their birth certificates for various reasons, whether to get their UK pension, to get their UK status, whatever it is that they need to have the birth certificate?
Well, what I'd say is that ideally, we would hope that that was not the situation, but we do understand the challenges. What I would say is that I think the window of opportunity is now to regularize and to sort out those things. So
Question?
even if persons would have traveled on documents not necessarily belonging to them, and they would have established themselves in their adult and professional life along those lines, the fact is that once the RGD has the original documents, then there is still the window of opportunity to obtain the RGD documents that truly belong to you, right? And once you have that, then you can now seek legal advice as to how you make the connection, whether it is through getting a formal deed poll done or whatever it is, right? So they may need some legal advice where that is concerned. So, but my advice would be to begin the process to obtain your documents, right? So even if you traveled on something or you came up with something that was not discreetly yours, now is the time to obtain what is yours from the RGD, and then seek the requisite legal advice to see how best now to create that linkage to maintain your identity.
And just to make it clear that there's no penalties from the RGD for you to be doing this. There's no legal.
No.
Okay. Colleague just signaled to me, is there a question? Just let us go. Now is the time.
Good evening, everyone, and sorry to be joining you this late. I was delayed in another department of the High Commission. And I don't know if this question went before, but we have another query with persons without the last name.
Yes.
Right. And persons who have acquired a middle name all of a sudden that was not on the original birth certificate. How do they reconcile that when for the last 50 years they have been using this name, this middle name, along with the only first name that appears on the birth certificate that they just applied for a week or two ago, and bring it in, and they're arguing with us that we should accept it? Could you please help us with explaining this to them? Thank you.
Okay. If I'm understanding the question, persons who would have had a certificate, so to speak, or a registration done where not all the names were included on the registration. Now is the time, and what we advise those persons to do is to engage the product called the late entry of name, right? However, for some persons, they may have the first and the surname. If they have the first and the surname, and then they are coming to say that they have a middle name, but we on our records we don't see that middle name at all. However, we see a first and a surname. We are going to deem that registration a complete registration, because what is required for a complete registration is a Christian name and a surname, not necessarily a middle name, right? For those persons who fall in that category and want to continue to use their middle name, right, because they have been established in it, those persons, we advise them that a deed poll for them would be the option that we would recommend, because we would not touch that registration, because that registration met all the required standards at the time, right? So so that's the situation for those persons. For the other individuals though, whose registration was done with not all their names included on it, the surname or the middle name, then those persons, we would treat it as registration that can be amended, and we just do the late entry of name, and they provide the relevant supporting documents, and we would use those as evidence to amend their certificates.
So a follow-up question. First, I'll present the scenario. So today we had someone who turned up with just a first and a middle name, but they switched it around to now the middle name is the first name, and the first name is the middle name. That's number one. And then number two, they are now using a certain surname, where in the brothers and the sisters, the siblings are all registered in that surname, but they're the only one, being the firstborn, who never had the surname. And so what we have requested of them to do is to do the late entry of name first, just to sort out that, and then do a deed poll. So correct me if I'm wrong in advising them to do this. And that was today, and the birth certificate was issued about 2 months ago.
Yeah, but no, so your advice is actually in line with what we would have advised as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just had another question. Someone has asked me to ask you about the addition of surname for a person who never had one and can't find document or school records. How would they approach that?
Well, it would be interesting to know why the person can't find documents or school records. That would be interesting, because we use a multiplicity of documents. It's not just school records. We ask for baptismal certificates. And for school records, it's not necessarily the first school. So if the person can't find the primary school document, maybe they can find the secondary school document or stuff like that. So I find it curious that the person is saying they can't find any supporting documents per se, because we will need some amount of supporting documents to process that document, that registration, right?
What are some of the documents that are required by the RGD for use as supporting documents?
Okay, excellent. So a number of documents, and it depends on what it is that you are trying to do. But in a nutshell, we ask for, so because most of these issues arise in relation to the birth certificate, what we try to do is to rely on documents that these individuals would commence using at a very early stage in their life. So we tend to ask many times for the immunization records, for example, because as you know, in Jamaica, immunization is basically compulsory, right? We ask for the baptismal or the christening record, because again, in Jamaica, it's a long-standing tradition where persons tend to do those things. We then would move on and we'd ask for the school record. Most times what we prefer is the basic school / primary school record and stuff. Those are the type of records that we rely on. And then outside of that, we rely also on the government issued IDs, even if those IDs are expired. Okay, we also ask for those IDs because we all consider them to be supporting documents.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think one final question, which is, well, just a comment and just your response to it, because from time to time, from time to time, one final question and something that comes from time to time, people say that they can't get their records because there was a fire at the RGD and a lot of records were lost and their records were among those. So that's why they can't have a birth certificate. What is your response to that?
They always say save the best for last. That is the absolute toughest question I've ever faced since being CEO. Can I be honest and tell you that I don't have an answer to that right now? Let me please allow me to speak to some of the more seasoned staff members here to find out how it is that they navigate those things. What I do know is that even though there was a fire, we don't keep our records in the same place. So the law requires us to keep records in original and duplicate format, which means even and one of the reasons is in such times. So if it is that the site where one set of records were being housed was compromised, whether through fire or through burglary or whatever, we do have a backup. So I believe that for those persons whose records, would have been compromised by fire, that we would rely primarily on the duplicate record in those instances. right? However, that is me speaking strictly from the standpoint of knowing what our standard operating procedures are, right? But because of the time of this fire and stuff, I'm not able to say if that SOP was in place at that time or being followed strictly at that time. So I'm just going to ask, crave your indulgence, that I seek some clarity on that, and whether through a subsequent email also, I advise you of the protocol that we would use to deal with matters of that nature.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
One last question, please, regarding deed polls. So what we have seen recently, about 3 deed polls came to my attention because I'm one of the quality control officers, if you would call it that. So I scrutinize the documents and before everything is signed off on to be sent off to Jamaica. And I've come across several deed polls where the name that they're changing is incorrectly spelled on the deed poll. So let's say someone is changing from Monroe to Taylor, and the Monroe was spelled Munro, and then at the end of the deed poll, when they say they absolutely abandon and renounce whatever, it's spelled Monroe. So clearly that's a discrepancy. Wouldn't it be so? Wouldn't you
It would
consider
be.
it to be a discrepancy?
It would be.
So
It
in
would
those
be.
cases, we ask them to go back to you guys and get it sorted out. So if you see about 3 coming in recent times, that's from me. Okay. Sorry.
But my question though is, why wouldn't, if they are changing the name from something to something else, then why wouldn't those persons be consistent with what is on the birth certificate? Since it is that is the name that they are intending to abandon anyway, wouldn't it be more logical for them to be consistent with what is on the birth certificate?
Right. I think it might be a typographical error or something, with the added E or the U for an O or something. So therefore, nothing is consistent in the document. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yes. So we send them back to get it corrected and the names to be properly aligned.
You would have to. You would have to. Definitely.
Thank you very much. That was Ms. Desiree Taylor, or Minister Counselor for Consular and Diaspora Affairs. So she gets a lot of the queries and she sees a lot of the documents that
I
will come
realize.
across her desk and has to sign off on a lot of them. So she has quite a lot of a heavy burden to bear when it comes to these matters. I'll now hand over to the Deputy High Commissioner, Ms. Patrice Leard-Grant, to formally closing remarks and to say thank you.
Not many closing remarks, just to say a really big thank you. We really appreciate the time that was spent with us this evening, midday, afternoon, your time, just walking us through the processes, the services also that are available from the RGD. I'm sure that you will see the comments after this on our YouTube channel, and most of them were comments that are in the positive. Wow, awesome, very informative, excellent. These are some of the adjectives that were used, and I think all of them are quite well deserved, well placed. Just want to thank you again, Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Charlton McFarlane of the RGD, as well as your database administrator, Mr. Rayton Borrell, for being with us this afternoon and for so ably guiding us through the services of the RGD and answering all the questions that members of our diaspora, as well as some of the members of staff here, had for you this evening. So once again, thank you. Thank you also to our technician behind the cameras, Mr. Theo Ambrose, and the other members of staff who are with us, Mrs. Seaver and Miss Taylor. Thank you for joining us, those in the virtual space and those joining us from our office here at the High Commission. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
All right, thank you.
A pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.